You know what, I've spent a lot of time criticizing the Rise of Skywalker. To be honest, I've made a lot of money criticizing the Rise of Skywalker, so is it maybe time for me to give back? I guess we'll see, but anyway, I was making the mistake of browsing Reddit, and on r/movies, there was the following discussion. What movie could you not maintain your suspension of disbelief? For me, by the way, I've got 3 kids. The entire premise of The Quiet Place, it's just not happening. Kids cannot be quiet, much less for every single moment of every day. Plus, eventually you're going to be outside and you're going to trip or stub your toe or something. But anyway, right now, the #1 most upvoted comment in that thread says the following. When Rey lines up the ancient blade map thing with the 30-year-old runes of the Death Star, all because she happened to be standing in the exact vantage point. Star Wars is the epitome of suspend your disbelief, but this scene just breaks basic intuitive understanding of reality in a way that's so simultaneously blatant, lazy, and reliant on multiple highly improbable plot contrivances, it's hard to believe it wasn't cooked in a lab with the express purpose of eliciting eye rolls. As a certified Rise of Skywalker hater, I've got to give some credit to the artistry which went into this comment, and I think they're mostly correct. The Rise of Skywalker is a series of fetch quests, and the dagger itself is really unnecessary. Now, to the degree I'm going to defend the Rise of Skywalker, I'll say this, and I can't even defend it using the movie. Adam Christopher in Shadows of the Sith implies that Ochi only received the dagger in the years after the destruction of Endor, and he got it basically brand new. So Palpatine in his weird-ass cradle sent his best artisans out to Keef Bir to put together the most wild ARG of all time. I think this is somewhat confusing because the knife has 2 secrets, and we learn earlier that it contains a message from a forbidden and ancient Sith language. So it makes sense. You see what looks like a ritual, ancient-looking knife with a long-dead Sith language, and you assume the knife is old. It appears that wasn't the case. But again, what's so frustrating is that the fetch quest really didn't need to happen this way, and the knife having this secondary feature where it points right to the Emperor's throne room if you're standing in just the right spot, just the right distance from the Death Star debris, assuming the waves haven't moved things around at all, is just not necessary because of how the knife has functioned up until this point. The knife already had secret instructions, and I think it would have been a lot more simple to just have those lead directly to Palpatine's lair. And it kind of does that. It says the planet where the Emperor's vault is, but I think they could have just condensed the 2 aspects of the knife into one, and I think they could have done something even more interesting. Because the idea of the knife being an ancient dagger, which then leads to the Wayfinder, is a little bit silly when you include the actual structure of the Death Star with the protractor popping out and everything. But what if the knife had been ancient, and instead of it saying specifically Palpatine's holocron is located at blah 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 blah, what if instead it was sort of an ancient Sith version of the Chosen One prophecy, or at least some form of Jedi prophecy? Maybe instead of saying the Emperor or Palpatine's Wayfinder, you say the path to the Sovereign can be discovered at the site of his final battle, or something like that. Then they can simply travel to the Death Star debris, and I think you let the movie take it from there. Either Rey feels the call of the dark side, or she discovers something in her fight with Kylo, but the film is already so bogged down by nonsense. Like, I get kind of exhausted just thinking about it. They go to Pisana to find the knife, they go to Kijimi to get the translation, they get captured by the Star Destroyer, totally unnecessary scene, I'd also cut that out. They then go to Keef Bir in the Endor system, they do the stuff with the knife, they find the Wayfinder, Rey takes the TIE Fighter back to Acto, everyone sort of converges at Exegol. It's just a lot of moving around, and it's a lot of chasing items. Also, I just want to throw this in there. I talked about this before the movie released. The size of the Death Star debris on Keef Bir is nowhere near as large as it should be, in my opinion. The second Death Star was about 200 kilometers wide, and what we're looking at here is a significant portion of the Death Star's super laser dish. This thing should be nearly 50 kilometers across, and It just doesn't look like that to me, although, to be honest, that's a very small complaint. Size in Star Wars never quite works out. But I do think, sort of going back to my idea, simplifying the knife and making the change that I suggested not only removes some of the busy work of the film, but I think also adds a bit more intrigue, which could be explained later on. One of the things I liked most about the sequels was the tie to ancient Sith and Jedi lore. I think that the visual dictionaries did a really good job of adding background details to all the books inside Luke's hut, some of the stuff we see in Episode 9 as well. We get connections to Mortis, to sort of the ancient Jedi trying to path a way towards Exegol. I think it would have been pretty cool for the events which had led to the final confrontation to have been sort of preordained. I've said this before, but I actually don't have a problem with Palpatine returning for the Rise of Skywalker. Palpatine is sort of like the devil character in Star Wars, so going into hell and getting there through sort of mystical knowledge from old is kind of a cool idea, though I guess it implies some sort of pre-knowledge or prophecy, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. That's pretty common in Star Wars. So did I defend the Rise of Skywalker? I don't know. Maybe, but I think there is an explanation for how the ancient Sith dagger has the route towards the Wayfinder. It's just not a great explanation, and it's not laid out specifically in the film. So this was a shorter video. Before we end it, I will take a couple of your hashtag AskEck questions. So this is an interesting one. It comes from Portwise, who says, after the Empire rose, were there any successors to the underground separatists we saw on Coruscant? Any underground rebel cells which specifically worked on Coruscant during the reign of the Empire? Did the people of Coruscant live happily? We see them celebrating the end of the Empire in the special editions for Return of the Jedi, so I'm curious what your take is. Coruscant is a complicated planet because it is so stratified. The elite on Coruscant, the people in the shiny towers, probably, especially if they were humans, would not have been overly affected by the change of the Empire to the Republic, at least unless they had, morals and ethics, which many of them didn't. But Coruscant really was the center of Imperial culture and Imperial power, so you saw in Star Wars Legends, for example, that the people of Coruscant were also most heavily affected by Palpatine's propaganda. They believed when the New Republic was coming to liberate the planet that the citizens were going to be executed or tortured en masse, which is why a bunch of them actually tried to flee as the New Republic was landing its forces. Certainly there would have been spies on Coruscant and there would have been small rebel cells, but I don't think there was any significant rebel activity because short of a potential assassination against Palpatine, which would have been something they'd look for, I don't think there was too much to do. Coruscant was just too locked down, and while the Senate still existed, the real rebels were people like Bail Organa or Mon Mothma, who were sort of openly defying the Empire while trying to accomplish political objectives. I think a lot of people on Coruscant would have lived happily. The new canon actually goes into quite a bit, sort of the riots and the celebrations which happened after the fall of the Death Star. Certainly much of the populace, especially the lower classes, did come out in celebration. Aftermath goes over this with, I think, the most detail. They're the ones toppling statues and stuff, but the Empire actually still remained nominally in control under Mas Amedda for some time, and at that point we saw more open rebellion against the Empire. But anyway, that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you've got any hashtag AskEck questions. Leave them down below. Until next time, I'll see you soon. Be safe. May the Force be with you.